الله بأي حقوق تتقدم على حق الدولة في قرارات السلم والحرب.
Good afternoon on this Tuesday, March 3rd. I'm Yumna Naufal. You're watching the English newscast. These are today's top stories. Prime Minister Tamam Salam schedules a cabinet session after 2 weeks of cancellations, announcing that the dispute over the decision-making system is resolved. A delegation of bishops visit Free Patriotic Movement chief Michel Aoun in Rabia to discuss with him the conditions of Christians in the Middle East. And Australia announces it will send another 300 troops to Iraq in a joint mission with New Zealand to help train local forces fighting to reclaim territory seized by ISIS. Prime Minister Tamam Salam has scheduled a cabinet session for Thursday after 2 weeks of cancellations, announcing that the dispute over the decision-making system has been resolved. In a statement released by his media office, Salam called for a session on March 5th where the agenda of the last meeting will be discussed. Salam had suspended cabinet sessions for 2 weeks because of internal disputes that prevented any decrees or decisions from being issued. Since President Michel Sleiman's term ended last May, the National Unity Cabinet has been tasked with approving laws and decrees. Unanimous consent was agreed upon as a requirement for the 24-member body to pass decrees, creating difficulties in getting decisions through the cabinet. A delegation of bishops visited Free Patriotic Movement MP Michel Aoun in Rabia to discuss with him the conditions of Christians in the Middle East. There are fears among religious minorities in both Syria and Iraq who have been repeatedly targeted by ISIS. During the militants' bloody campaign in both countries, where they have declared a self-styled caliphate, minorities, including Christians, have been repeatedly targeted and killed and driven away from their homes. They've also had their women enslaved in places of worship destroyed. The abductions of more than 220 Christians, Assyrians by ISIS in the northeastern part of Syria last week have added to the existing fears. ISIS and Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Nusra Front are entrenched on Lebanon's eastern border region. And on that note, more than a dozen Assyrian Christians fleeing the onslaught by ISIS in Syria have entered Lebanon since last night, according to General Security official Nabil Hanoun, who said no Assyrian was stranded on the border. He did not give a figure for how many Assyrians have crossed into the country, but the state-run national news agency said that at least 17 had entered. Lebanese officials have generally welcomed calls to allow Assyrians to enter Lebanon from Syria, despite a month-old ban now on accepting new refugees. Syrian regime forces and Kurdish militia fought separate battles with ISIS militants in a strategic area near the Iraqi and Turkish borders, according to a monitoring group. Forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad and fighters from the Kurdish People's Protection Units launched uncoordinated offensives against ISIS in the northeastern province of Hasakeh, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said. The head, Rami Abdurrahman, told AFP that the 3 days of clashes, regime forces bolstered by fighters from Arab tribes had secured control over 23 villages in the center of the province from ISIS. Syria's official news agency put the number at 31. ISIS launched an attack last week on the areas around Kurdish-controlled Tal Tamar and kidnapped 220 Christians from 11 villages. The director of U.S. National Intelligence, James Clapper, said that violence committed by ISIS was deterring some from providing donations to them. Clapper said publicized brutalities by ISIS, beheadings and immolations and the like have really had a galvanizing effect in reducing the amount of money being funneled to ISIS.
Probably the most frequent threat that we hear or worry about, which is the homegrown violent extremist. ISIL particularly is very slick, very sophisticated proselyting and recruiting, and they are very astute users of social media, and so this is a challenge for us as it is in Europe. You know, these brutalities, publicized brutalities by ISIL, beheadings and immolations and the like, have really had a galvanizing effect even in the Mideast. And so I think it is bringing about a change. One thing we see is the donations to extremist groups from many of these countries, donors in the countries, are declining.
Australia announced it will send another 300 troops to Iraq in a joint mission with New Zealand to help train local forces fighting to reclaim territory seized by ISIS. The decision follows Wellington last week deciding to deploy some 140 soldiers in a non-combat role to boost the Iraqi military's ability to battle the jihadists. Prime Minister Tony Abbott said the decision followed a formal request from the Iraqi and U.S. governments with the mission to attend to span 2 years. The move comes as some 330,000 Iraqi troops and militia backed by aircraft pounded jihadists in and around Tikrit in the biggest offensive yet to retake one of the Islamic State's group's main strongholds on the country. Yemen's president is offering the Saudi capital Riyadh as a possible venue for the resumption of UN talks with Shia rebels who have seized Yemen's own capital of Sana'a. President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi made the offer during a meeting with tribal leaders, according to 2 participants and an aide to the president who spoke on condition of anonymity. They said Hadi offered Riyadh as an alternative venue if the Houthi rebels continue to oppose moving the talks from Sana'a, which has been under their control since September. The Iranian-backed Houthis are almost certain to reject moving the talks to Riyadh, given Saudi Arabia's opposition to their power grabbing in its southern neighbor. Coming up next, Netanyahu addresses the U.S. Congress in an increasingly heated battle with the White House over Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the English news on Future Television. Israel's Prime Minister addressed the U.S. Congress in an increasingly heated battle with the White House over Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Negotiations resume in Switzerland as we speak. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has attacked repeatedly the emerging Iran deal and is reportedly planning to unveil details to U.S. lawmakers to show why he believes it poses a grave danger to Israel.
Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of my address to Congress tomorrow is to speak up about a potential deal with Iran that could threaten the survival of Israel. Iran is the foremost state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Look at that graph. Look at that map that you see on the wall. It shows Iran training, arming, dispatching terrorists on 5 continents. Iran envelops the entire world with its tentacles of terror. This is what Iran is doing now without nuclear weapons. Imagine what Iran would do with nuclear weapons. You're here to tell the world that reports of the demise of the Israeli-U.S. relations is not only premature, they're just wrong. You're here to tell the world that our alliance is stronger than ever. You know, never has so much been written about a speech that hasn't been given. And I'm not going to speak today about the content of that speech, but I do want to say a few words about the purpose of that speech. First, let me clarify what is not the purpose of that speech. My speech is not intended to show any disrespect to President Obama or the esteemed office that he holds. I have great respect for both.
U.S. President Barack Obama's national security advisor said that a bad nuclear deal with Iran is worse than no deal at all. Susan Rice was speaking on his behalf at the annual meeting of the pro-Israeli lobby American Israel Public Affairs Committee, known as AIPAC.
Israel's security, our mutual security, is also at the heart of one of President Obama's most important foreign policy objectives, ensuring that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. As President Obama has repeated many times, we are keeping all options on the table to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. But this is not simply a challenge for Israel. It's a danger to the entire world, including the United States. End of quote. Now, I want to be very clear. A bad deal is worse than no deal.
Actress Emma Watson announced that she will host a He for She event in London on March 8th, which is International Women's Day. In this video posted on her Facebook page, Watson announced she will participate in the event to be held on this day. Just so you know, He for She is a solidarity movement that promotes gender equality.
Hi. So, March, Sunday, the 8th. That doesn't make sense. Sunday, the 8th of March. It's International Women's Day. This is very exciting, and I hope that you will also be excited because I am going to be conducting a live Q&A in London answering your questions about gender equality. I'm also hoping that you might want to be a member of the audience. If you would like to be a member of the audience, there is a form on my Facebook page which you can fill out telling me how you are advancing gender equality, or telling me about how gender inequality has affected your life, or you can send me some questions. If you can't be there in person, Facebook are live streaming the event, which is very exciting, and I hope that you will tune in and watch. And I think that's all the information I have to convey, other than just to say thank you so much for all of your support and participation so far. It's been absolutely amazing, and just amazing adventure, journey, experience for me. So thank you. You guys are really awesome. Okay, that's all. Bye.
We'll be counting down the days until International Women's Day on March 8th. This marks the end of our bulletin. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Weeks of cancellations announcing that the dispute over the decision-making system has been resolved. A delegation of bishops visit Free Patriotic Movement chief MP Michel Aoun in Rabia to discuss with him the conditions of Christians in the Middle East. And Australia announced that it will send another 300 troops to Iraq in a joint mission with New Zealand to help train local forces fighting to reclaim territory seized by ISIS. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal signing off. Have a good night.